And I thought, I'd love to spend the last good years. I felt like I was at my best years in doing what I love doing. But I didn't know what to do. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you at this point, that prayer retreat was in July of 2012. I had no clue what I was to do. And like most people in the ministry, you think we can't leave because who will think we're qualified to do anything else outside the church?
Isn't that the truth? So that's one of the internal messages, isn't it? That's what we keep fearing. I can't leave. There is no other option.
And it was compounded by the fact that in 2008, we're trying to transition to another home. We got stuck with 2 homes for 2.5 years. It wiped us out financially. So we had no resources, nothing extra, no lines of credit, no savings, no stock, no nothing. And we were heavily in debt. So on a Wednesday night of that prayer retreat, I felt so clearly. I stayed up all night just journaling God's call and reading the Abraham story. Steve, I just want you to trust me. I want you to leave everything and trust me. And immediately I started thinking of all the reasons I couldn't do that. That makes no sense, Lord. It was the scariest thing. But over the course of 12 straight hours of being in one place and writing and thinking and praying, I said, okay, I'll do it. And it was on a Wednesday, and it was the same type of response I gave to him back in 76. And I go, okay, but now I've got a wife that's got to go along with this thing. So I called home that night, and Geneva says, what did the Lord tell you today? And I said, well, he said, I'm to trust him. I'm to walk away from the church ministry and into a place he's going to show me. And there's this quiet flutter on the other end of the phone. And there was this pause for a little bit, and her next words were, Steve, we have no savings, no stocks. We're upside down on our house. We don't really have any retirement. Our youngest son is about to start college next month, and you want to walk away from a 6-figure paying job. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. And she said, well, can you go back until you find something else? And I thought that one through. And here was the key for me. And it's not the key for everybody. I'm not advocating doing this. But I said, I could do that, but that won't require the faith and the trust that I think God's wanting me. Is this kind of an Abraham thing? And I said, but I'm not going to force you to it. I'm not going to do it if you're not in agreement. But if I go back, you're going to have to start going back to church, because she was so fed up. She'd quit going. I said, I'm not going to be the pastor of a church my wife's not going to attend. And she said, well, you've got a point there. And so I said, we'll talk about it when I get home. I'm not being asked to leave. There was no trouble, except I felt like I wanted to minister in some other ways. But I had no clue. As a matter of fact, Chris, at this point, and Kim, I'd never even heard of coaching. I did not know what it was. I had no clue what I was going to do. About 3 weeks after that, I'm still trying to figure out, what am I going to do here? Well, I go into counseling, but I didn't want to go through all the hoops. But I met with a counselor that I often referred to, and made an appointment with to see her. She said, just wanting to know if I can make a living doing that. She said, yes, you can, but why would you want to? And she had this bag sitting next to her, and she pulled out 2 books and said, Steve, I don't know if you've heard of coaching, but I think you would be great at it. And he handed me, listen to this, she handed me Coactive Coaching. How about that you're using the essentials? And Patrick Williams and Menendez's book, Becoming a Professional Life Coach. And she said, look at these. I read those 2 books in 2 days. I read them cover to cover. I said, this is exactly kind of how I do my pastoral counseling. This is great. Why have I never heard of this? And then I started looking up, well, where can I go learn how to do this? And a week later, I was speaking to a friend, someone you may know, Linda McDaniel,
sure.
And she had taken a class. She said, well, have you thought about PCCI? And I said, what is that? I thought it was a credential. And so she told me about it. I went online and looked at it, was most impressed. But I got a speaking engagement, a pretty big one, due to a mutual friend with Fortune 500 company, Edward Jones, just a regional meeting, nothing big at headquarters. Don't want to misrepresent that. But it was going to be about 150 people there. And what I did not know until I got there was that the head person over North and South Carolina was present, and also some other wholesalers, like from Pacific Life, Lincoln Financial, and those kind of people were there. And I'm sitting in this room, and I'm scrambling with Kim's help to get a website up so I could have something to point to, and I didn't even know when I was walking in. I was sitting down in this thing for 2 hours before I get up to speak, and they're talking all these financial terms and language what the market is doing. I understand none of it, and I'm as scared as I can be. I'm thinking all those negative thoughts. I am out of my league. I don't belong here. What am I doing here? Who am I fooling? Just all of those things, which are the voice of the evil one, who would have you think you misheard that call. And so I was sitting there thinking, wait a minute, I know what I'm going to talk about today. I may not know what they're talking about, but I know what I'm going to talk about. And I'm an expert on that. And they're not. And I just had to keep remembering that. I didn't dare. I wanted to drink a glass of water so badly while I was talking, but my hand was shaking so much I didn't dare reach the glass. But I got 2 clients from that talk. And then that started to snowball. I had that 6-month window. So around end of February, I had to get a part-time job, 20 hours a week, for a friend selling garage doors, which he needed help because it was a new facet of his business. So I was learning new product on that end, learning coaching. I was working 7 days a week, long hours, just trying to absorb everything, and kept that job for about 1 year and 4 months, backing down to half time. And then finally, even though I could not make the numbers work, as you said, in July 14, decided I can't build the business anymore while working half time. There comes that leap of faith you got to finish taking.
Yeah. Well, not just the leap of faith, another in a series of big leaps and small steps of faith. And it's fascinating to be able to get your kind of retrospective on the whole situation. And it sounds like there's almost a couple parallel tracks going at the same time, Steve. One is the external skills that you do need to be learning. You want to be a fabulous coach so that people will refer you and recommend you, and taking those skills development classes, and then taking Chris's Accidental Entrepreneur, which is now called the Successful Coach class, for business building, and then you and I working on marketing. Whoa, tons of learning. But then for you to also identify so clearly what a lot of people can't quite put a voice to, those internal struggles. I'm not good enough. It's not going to work out. What if people find me out? What have I done? And all those voices that go in our head. So it's almost like you're fighting 2 battles at the same time. And then, like you said, working very, very long hours. So I have to ask, if you would share 1, 2, 3, whatever, what kind of things helped you persevere to get through that initial growth period, which is so hard?
Well, obviously, you want to say the Lord, that's a general way, but let's talk about how the Lord does that. Primarily, he did through some fellow coaches that I met in the triads that we just kept up, calls after the class was over just to encourage one another. I made sure I was in a support group. I meet with a group of folks that I love, that loved me, that actually left the church after I did, just because we formed a small fellowship. But we meet for breakfast every Thursday morning. So I've got a core group of people who are just encouragers. You need those. And I really needed that too, because one thing I have not said is just how hard this was for my wife. there was no security in this. There's no guaranteed paycheck that we'd had for years. We had no margin to fall back on. And I would look, there was 1 month in, I didn't doubt, that call was so clear. It was a year and 2 months before I really doubted it. I mean, sincerely doubted it. And I was working on the numbers, and I saw a low month was coming up the next month. And I just had to tell Geneva, I don't quite know how we're going to handle this. We had always had enough to pay the bills and a little bit left over, but not much. But 1 month I hadn't gotten any new clients. I'd finished up with several others. And I said to her, I can't see how we're going to pay our bills this month. And she started crying. And I was really scared too. I'd like to say that I had this just resounding trust that never wavered, but it did waver. And I went to the Lord about that and just said, honestly, I'm scared, and I'm ashamed that I'm scared, because I want to claim that I believe you and I do trust you, but it's a fragile one here. But I'm going to go back. I'm going to remember that word you gave me that summer on the mountain. And I kid you not, the next day, a prospective client called me up and said, I heard you talk a while back. I want to start. I've just had a little bit of windfall come in. Will you give me a little bit of a discount if I pay you 3 months in advance?
Beautiful.
And, I had to think about that for a while.
3 seconds, 4 seconds.
Right. Yeah. It seemed like forever, but I said, sure, I do that. And so I threw out a figure. And then, doggone it, if I didn't have 3 days later, another client want to start and pay me 3 months in advance. And what turned out to be, I went back to Geneva by the end of the week and said, how I said we weren't going to pay the bills? We've just now had our biggest month to date. And God just keeps sending the manna like that. When I don't know where it's going to come from, I didn't generate those. He's so faithful. But the support group, just staying honest before the Lord and admitting those times, you don't want to deny you're scaring, but admit them.
The key message that I'm hearing you say is, once you spent time before the Father, over and over, open, transparent, realizing fully, this is what he's calling me to, and you checked it with those you trust, those whose support you would need, then you commit. You make the plunge, and you move forward, and you deal with the internal obstacles and the external obstacles one at a time. Just boom, boom, boom. Press into them. Move forward. Don't let them cut you out at the knees and halt this thing you've so recently committed to.
Yes. One other thing I would remember, you and Kim both, I heard each of you say at one time, it will take you 3 to 5 years to build a coaching practice that you can make a living on. Now, see, I didn't believe that, because I believe I could do this in 18 months to 2 years. And that's part of the optimist that I am. But when I got discouraged because that did not happen, I remembered your words and said, well, here are experienced people who are wise counselors who maybe there was some truth. I will believe that. I will not consider myself a failure or whatever. So the kinds of things, the impressions you folks make upon your students when you open up and tell us what it'll really be like. You're not just selling us a weekend coaching program and go out and make 6 figures. And it's a lot of hard work, and it takes time, and it takes skill building. But you offer all of those support systems to make that happen.
And I have to ask you, now on this side of it, not that you've probably arrived to where you ultimately want to be. I know there's always things to tweak and change. But what are you most excited about, this new lifestyle that your faith in God has allowed you to create?
It's far more relaxed. I tell you what, I don't have to work with people I don't like, which
is huge.
which is huge. I set the schedule I want, and it's full. I mean, I'm not at the point where I can back off. I'm still having the hardest thing about this still at this point is locating new clients, the new prospects. It's not to the point where I've got people who are established and they're coming to you because you got enough referrals out there. But it's a good place. I enjoy the benefits. I've been asked, would you go back? Because a lot of people said, you're gifted at that. You need to do that. And sometimes I wonder, learning the coaching skills that I have now, particularly now that I'm working with businesses and managers and leaders, what would I do differently if I did step back into the church? And so I'm tempted to think that. And when I go there very long, though, I start getting sick to my stomach again. And I realize that I love the pace of life that I have now, mainly because, I'm not trying to please or make a lot of people happy, just me and my wife, basically, and hopefully clients through good service.
Very, very good. There's a saying in stand-up comedy when people are trying to break into that very high pressure field, you may not be that funny. So they always say, as you're making your transition, don't quit your day job. You might not be that funny.
That's right.
We do always emphasize to our students, as you discern the call to this profession and as you begin then your training and starting to make your transition, do anticipate a typically 3 to 5 year transition period. And the way I always break it down, the first year, you're just going to be learning like crazy. You don't even know what you don't know, and you're going to make mistakes. And that's the best way to learn. The real learning starts when you begin doing. So you do it, but you're going to finish up that first year in the red. So know that going in and look at either can you stay on your day job, or can you cut back to 3/4 time, or can you pick up some side income, or can a spouse help you out with income? You're going to need a nest egg of some sort somewhere in that first year. In that second year, typically, persons begin to really find the payoff. They I call it turn their corner somewhere in the midst of their second year. And as you said, it doesn't mean that everything just starts suddenly flowing. But they probably will finish up that second year, if not in the black, at least breaking even. It's not until the third year typically that you're actually being able to predictably take out of the business month after month, running the business in the black. And still, it's not running like a well-oiled machine. As you said, you don't yet have enough word of mouth out on the street. There aren't enough people that are satisfied clients just sending you other clients and such. So that 2 to 3 year transition where you turn your corner, finally figure it out, it starts to pay off, and you're drawing steady salary or steady income from it, that's a much more typical transition. And I think that's what Kim and I are both hearing in terms of the general path that you have shown forth. These next couple of years should be principally marked by, now that you know what you're doing and you are a known entity and you do have a network built, you keep tweaking and modifying and expanding. You improve that website presence. You add some other key talks that you can give, etc. And it does start to eventually run like a fairly well-oiled machine. But it's a process.